Okay. Um, Hi, hello everyone. Welcome to the 438th meeting of the New York Comics and Picture-story Symposium. Thank you for joining us. Um, Apologies for my voice. I'm currently under the weather, but I'm going to power through this introduction. The symposium is an ongoing weekly series of artist talks that are always free and open to the public. On the subject of comics, visual narratives, animation, or picture stories of any sort. It was founded over a decade ago by Ben Catcher and receives funding for the presenters from the Will and Ann Eisner Family Foundation and the New School. So the format and the subject of the talks is entirely open to the invited artists. So they're very free form and casual and intimate. All these talks are posted on the symposium YouTube page afterwards. So it's a really wonderful resource for watching past talks. Um, and if anyone you know who was interested in this and couldn't join for the live version, please share the YouTube page with them so they can check it out after the fact. My name is Lily Cray. I'm one of the organizers this fall, along with Ben Catcher, Austin English, and Bill Cartalopoulos. Um, we are very honored to have not one, but two really, truly wonderful artists joining us today, of whom I am a big fan of both, Dash Shaw and R. Kikuo Johnson, to discuss the work of an artist that inspires them, Rea Irvin, and a new collection of his comic strip, The Smythes, that they co-edited. Um, we will be doing a Q&A at the end of the talk, and that's a really big part of the idea of the symposium is back and forth with the artists. So as questions come to you, hang on to them, and you can ask them directly after their presentation by writing it in the chat or raising your hand and speaking your question out to them. Um, let's see. Usually I read the bios of the artists, but these two have kind of folded in their own intros into their presentation. So I'm just going to go ahead and hand it over to them.
All right. Thank you so much for having us. I
Yeah,
guess I'll
thanks
jump
so
right.
much.
Mhm. I guess I'll just jump right into my introduction here. Sharing my screen. So, like our subject today, Rea Irvin, do a lot of different jobs. One thing I do is I'll do book covers. Occasionally, I'm an illustrator. I do book covers. This book, obviously taken off of Rea Irvin's famous Eustace Tilly cover of The New Yorker. This was a pair of books that were released this year, collecting 100 years of fiction and poetry, spinning out that idea. Um, in doing this, my Rea Irvin or my Eustace Tilly, or Rea Irvin's Eustace Tilly looks like he has hair going from his head to his beard, but mine looks like hamburger for some reason. And then let me see if I can. Okay, another thing I do magazine covers occasionally. This one's for the New Yorker, and of course, this is also a spin on the Eustace Tilly image, the nose in the air, the dandy, the well-dressed dandy. My version is buying or has a bag that looks curiously like the fake bags on Canal Street in New York. I do some advertising work like Rea Irvin also did, and occasionally do some animation design. And also, like Rea Irvin, that we're here to talk about, I do comics. And this is a graphic novel I did that was published in 2021. And in this one, I was really trying to find a kind of more quieter, nuanced approach to performance that I took a lot from Rea Irvin. So just wanted to, and also kind of adopted that clear line style that Irvin also uses in the Smyths, which we'll talk about. And that's my brief introduction.
Thank you. Uh, I I make comics and cartoons. This most recent one, Blurry, is about someone choosing between two dress shirts to wear to his brother's wedding, and it kind of he's undecided, and the woman at the store helps him by telling a story about being undecided between two very similar things, and it kind of moves into her indecision, and it goes deeper and deeper and deeper into all these people, and then the latter half of the book is rippling out from the people until he chooses the dress shirt and goes to the wedding. Um, and I did a bunch of different comics before this discipline, Bottomless Belly Button, Body World, New School. I liked comics forever, and grew up with a very healthy, or unhealthy, depending on your perspective, kind of history of comics around me. But strangely, I didn't really get into the gag cartoonists until I was like 30. And it was a wonderful new world that opened up to me. Like, because I knew about newspaper comics and Japanese comics and American superhero comics, of course, but I don't know why they were off my radar, but they got on my radar, and it kind of came at the perfect time in my life, where it was like, oh, there's this whole other realm of people who had their own way of drawing everyday objects, everyday places that were telling, mundane stories often, or stories about kind of societal archetypes, or and I especially really liked Garrett Price, who some of you may know White Boy, that was reprinted in a bunch of different places, but he also did a bunch of gag comics that were in a collection called Drawing Room Only. And Drawing Room Only was really my Bible for this book, the washes in it. And something that I really liked about him was kind of like Rea Irvin, if I'm allowed to say. He's not very funny. And so the moments that are in Drawing Room Only, these gag moments, are kind of more like a tableau, a moment in time that isn't very silly, or even poking fun. He was more like someone who just liked to draw, and was tasked with coming up with gag comic imagery. And in that book, a lot of those weren't in the New Yorker, because tons of magazines had different gag comics. This also happened to align when I moved to Richmond, and there were a bunch of used bookstores that would have you could real used bookstores where you could buy a $5 Look magazine from 1963 and read it while eating your lunch and throw it away. Not pricey used bookstores. So where was I going with that? Oh, but Garrett Price, he was one of these people that Rea Irvin worked. Rea Irvin was the art editor of the New Yorker, and just like Garrett Price had his little excursion into newspaper comics with White Boy, Rea Irvin had his excursion with the Smythes. And there was no Rea Irvin book at that time. And when I was talking to the New York Review of Comics, I suggested a Rea Irvin book because I was Googling, looking for one. And Lucas said, well, would you like to do it? And I said no, but just because it seemed like too much work. But then maybe a year or something after that, Kikuo was talking about the Smythes. And so the idea of doing the book with Kikuo and it being a collaborative effort made the whole thing so much more fun. This is a book that I have coming out next year, Like Swimmers. This one's kind of like a murder mystery comic. Some of this was in Bomb magazine and Smoke Signal and the Momo website. And this I also have coming out next year. I make these animated movies. I started making animations very, very lo-fi just by myself. And then I roped in my wife, Jane, and then we roped in more people. And now they're not enormous operations, but they're bigger. They're getting bigger, and this actually working on these kind of projects, I feel like was the most like working on the Smythes book, um, because it was emailing people, asking if they could do something for the book, scan a page, and them not responding for a month, and then emailing them again. And that's very similar to the filmmaking process, the glamour of the filmmaking process. And it's also kind of like the Smythes book, where maybe um, I have an idea of what it is that we're doing, and Kikuo has his own idea, and NYRC have their idea, and all of our ideas smashed together, and out pops the the object that, I think in the Smythes case, is much better than each of our singular ideas. A collaboration that gets hashed out. Kikuo, you want to talk about something? You got to unmute.
Thanks, Dash.
Also, it's just interrupting for a sec to say, if there's a way to show your images full screen when you screen share, there was a request in the chat for that.
Awesome. Were mine small too? Mine were also small.
I don't remember.
Okay, that's okay. I'll see what I can do here. Let me see. Okay, so is that looking small, or is that the full screen?
That looks great.
Awesome. Okay. So I'm going to continue from what Dash was talking about, the origin of the book and just the kind of creative process. And I'll second what Dash said. Like the collaboration was so fun to do this project, and just to like hang out with Dash and Lucas at NYRC and talk about comics nonstop was so fun. It all started with this. This is a 2-page spread from the famous Smithsonian Book of Newspaper Comics, I think is the correct title. And this is an anthology that came out in the 70s, Bill Blackbeard anthology of old comics. And there was just these 2 Smythes pages printed. And they really stuck out. I wasn't sure what stuck out to me at first, but part of it is just that elegant Art Deco style, that design. Another part of it, at the time, I didn't know that that Rea Irvin was the designer of the typeface of the New Yorker logo. But you can see the resemblance of just that like striving for elegance in the Smythes title, and then just the beautiful design of the strip. So this was like my introduction to the strip. I think it was almost all of our introductions to the strip. And I remember seeing this and wanting to see more, and just there not being more to see. And then when I started working on my last graphic novel, I really was looking for examples of comic strips that were kind of had that, as I mentioned, that kind of understated performance. And so a librarian told me that all these old newspaper strips that at least were in the New York Herald Tribune, where the Smiths was printed, are all on microfilm online, and that if you just have a New York Library card, you can dig through the papers. So I would actually dig through. So the Smiths ran for 7 years, and I dug through 7 years of papers, and you actually have to find the Sunday and then dig through a 200-page newspaper to find the Sunday section, which wasn't always in the same place. But this is an example of it in context. And of course, in the microfilm, it's black and white. And you can see that on the left, Brutus, classic 1930s comic strip. It's a slapstick comic strip. It's beautifully drawn, but the jokes are, the bear and the poof, and then kicking the butt of the bear, and with it's slapstick, right? And the more I looked at these Smith strips, I was like, it really does stand out. It really is a completely different approach. And in fact, this example, you see that John and Margie, our 2 protagonists of the strip, go to the theater to watch this Art Deco movie, standing in line, beautiful Art Deco theater, and then they see slapstick, and John says, what's funny about that, right? Almost pointing out the distinction, like we're doing something different, like the Smythes is something different. Here's the same, when Dash and I finally started digging around for strips and finding the color versions, here's the same panel in color. So beautiful to really see that come alive. But yeah, it did seem almost like Rea Irvin's kind of mission was to go against the broad slapstick comedy, and he was a trained actor, so it makes sense that that was kind of his focus. This is a photo that Dash took while we were out in at the Billy Ireland in Columbus, Ohio. Of course, they have a giant archive of comic strips, newspaper comic strips, and otherwise an original art. And it so happened that I think most of the Smith stuff was not cataloged, or maybe at least a large portion of it. So it was real digging. So Dash and I were out there digging through old newspaper, and it was such a joy.
Let me interject with a couple things if I can. Right.
Please.
We are 99% sure that the joke of the title is that they're like the Smiths, but they're trying to sound more worldly. They're the common Smiths, but they're trying to sound. Oh, you're getting there. All right.
No.
So
Please.
they're the Smythes. That's
Right.
the joke of the title. And as Kikuo found in this ad, we think that people of the 1930s would have understood this joke and
Yeah.
found it
So
hilarious.
yeah. So the Smythes and the Smiths, they both love luxury, and so here's an ad for bedding from that period. So pretty sure that's the joke. But just another example of kind of maybe the strip that's closest to the Smiths is Bringing Up Father by George McManus. It predated the Smiths by a few years, but it also, just in terms of theme, it's the married couple and their foibles. But I think this really illustrates the difference in the kind of performance that Rea Irvin was striving for. On the top, you have famously Mags and Jigs in an argument that ends with pots flying and total hyperbole, and then to the extent that Jigs is up a telephone pole to escape his brutal wife, and then or exaggeratedly brutal wife. And then contrast that, and this is one of the moments that really made me fall in love with the Smiths, where just this hand, you can see that here's John like trying to philander a little bit and talk up this cute circus performer, and the nervousness in those fingers is communicated in such a human and amazing. It just blows my mind. I see it now, I still get excited about it. And then this transition of this hand to this hand, where he's like, I've always been fond of horses, and his hand straightens out and he's kind of smoothing his pants. And you see Margie step in with the kids. You see the balled up fist, and then the hand transitions to surprise, and Margie suddenly got her hands on her hips. And really just that performance is kind of what drew me in, and it really did feel distinct. It really feels like something completely different in the Sunday pages. And just made me want to read more and more.
And
Yep.
for everyone who talked about him would talk about him as an actor.
Right. Yeah. Member of the Players Club in New York. Sorry, go ahead, Dash.
Yeah. Do you did you have more in this, or should I switch to looking at the book itself? You got more in this?
No, that's it. Yeah. Well, let's jump right in.
I think another thing to say, just as an introduction to Rea Irvin and the Smythes, to know is that he was older than the other New Yorker gag cartoonists that we think of. This guy was born in 1880, so he's the age of Rockwell Kent and George Harriman, and so the Garrett Price is like, I think, 20 something years younger than him, even though White Boy was also in the early 30s. You know, he's older than Peter Arno. He's older than Glorious Williams. He's old. He's the old guy of this crowd. So then when he did the Smythes, he was 50. whereas all these other people were start doing their comic strips in their 30s or younger. Um, my mom asked how two people wrote an introduction, and I told her that it was like a battle royale of sentences, where I would suggest a sentence, and you and um, Lucas and Annika would shut it down. And so the intro is the surviving sentences of the bloodbath.
It's pretty accurate. It made
That's
it
how
hard.
it felt.
Yeah, yeah. It made it hard to have like a. I feel like a lot of intros might have been like, well, this is how I discovered the Smiths, but like you can't really do that with two people, so it became a different declarative thing. But I think I'm really proud of it. I think it works.
Especially Caitlin wrote the biographical essay in the back, and so I think of our intros like the intro in a screening where it's like just be short and say why you like the strip and get people psyched. The we like kind of like I'm sure Kikuo and every other cartoonist my age, we were during the we were in college during the golden age of comic reprints, and so all of the complete Peanuts and all of these incredible books coming out were the coolest, most inspirational books. And so I had never been involved in a reprint project like this before, and so it felt like I got to kind of say thank you in my way to and get to kind of participate in it. And part of that was spending a lot of time with the PDF and shuffling things around. Because also, I don't know if it was clear from what we said, we didn't have a book that we were then just reprinting. We were finding the strips, so we were limited by what we could find. And then part of we had a million different, I don't know if Kikuo wants to go, we had a million different ways of thinking about how to do it. And it ultimately settled in this way, which is chronological, which I think is the best way. But it means that the first strips are the worst condition and also maybe not the best strips. So it really, I think, gets rockin'. Well, this one is a favorite of mine. I like all of the ones where they kind of interact with someone from the outside world. This one.
Dash, is there a way if your screen, can you pull it
is my
wider?
screen small?
It's a little bit small, but maybe like if you just pull the window wider, does it get wider, the bottom corner?
Or
I'm
there you
looking
go.
at it
There you
very
go. Nailed
wide
it.
right now.
yeah.
That's it. You did it. You did it.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe I don't know. Actually, I don't know. Was it better to see the whole strip? Now we're just kind of seeing like a portion of it. Oh, this strip is really, really interesting. So I can you go back to the one with the horse, the jockey? So something interesting with
Yes.
one of these projects, this is a comic strip from the 1930s, of course. And one of the discussions we had to have was like, I mean, we're picking and choosing which strips go in addition to like, what are our dream strips to include? And then which are the strips we can find? By the way, we found at least like 80% of all the strips, I would say, of the section of the time that we were looking for. And so one of the discussions, of course, is like, what do we just really what is inappropriate for 2025, right? That is just like a very difficult conversation. Some of them are really obvious. I will say that overall, the Smiths is pretty, there's not a whole lot of racial caricature in it. There's a little bit that pops in, but there's not a whole lot. But then another thing that is really interesting about the Smiths is the queer representation that pops up. And so like, this is an example where this is like a female jockey comes in and kind of, the implication is that might be wooing Marge, the wife. And just to read that in a comic from the 1930s was so cool and just so interesting. But it was still like, are we playing on, how much are we relying on stereotypes here? How much is this not the kind of representation? Is this something that we should be alert to? So we had a lot of readers kind of jump in and give us their 2 cents, and queer readers and gave us the thumbs up, that at least felt that this is something that they'd want to see and read, and absolutely fascinating. And just from a historical perspective, and there's actually also his work would constantly, we'll talk about it later, but Irving's cover work for the New Yorker often overlapped in terms of theme and imagery from the Smyths. So you see some of there's jockey covers of the New Yorker as well, with some of the same cultural implications. Really, really interesting stuff.
Something that I remember when we would kind of have those discussions around the key strips of whether something would bum people out to read it, is that his drawing ability was, I think, above his writing, or like his drawing sensitivity was higher tuned than his writing sensitivity. And so there would be instances where someone would be like the butt of a joke in the comic, but we would look at him and be like, but this looks like a very like well-drawn specific person who has their own identity, because he was so good at drawing faces and and no one felt like a stock character. Everyone has their unique that so this he gets mixed up. He falls in with a bunch of communists here.
Let's zoom in on one of those faces just to give him an example of like I don't know if that's possible.
I guess it shouldn't have been there. Is that good?
Oh yeah, awesome. Yeah, yeah. See, it's a little bit, yeah.
This kid in the upper right hand corner.
There you go. Awesome. Yeah, like every single one of them feels like an individual. And that was another thing that really drew me to this strip, was all the background characters. Just from a pure kind of thievery point of view, like, oh, there's so many faces and character designs to steal in this strip.
I'd like to kind of change and just talk about Kikuo's cover for a second, if I may. The uh, a big thing with doing, you see it? Is it big or small?
It's full screen, I think. I think that's like full screen. Yeah, that's good.
Something I feel like when we put this together, we're kind of creating the context around the strip. And for me, the goal for the context was fun characters. You've seen collections where they emphasize different things about the strip, and I thought with the Smythes, the thing to emphasize was Margie and John, maybe especially Margie, because the whole book is about their relationship. And so can the cover kind of, I mean, Kikuo did this beautifully with the cover, but have it be their relationship and the characters be the book, as opposed to it feeling like an archival project or about old newspapers or any other aspect of the book that could have been highlighted. And so Kikuo, I think he'll show the sketches that led to this cover, but I also found this cover very, very funny because it's like someone doing a vocal impression of another person, and the kind of idiosyncrasies of their voice are highlighted or exaggerated slightly. And it made me kind of see Irvin's drawings differently after hearing the exaggerated impression. Like Margie's hand here, holding John, to me, I'm like, that's an Otto Saglo hand. And it helped it kind of helped me see, and so then I picked up the Little King book, and he was also worked for the New Yorker under Rea Irvin, and was I think he's, I don't know, 20 years younger than Rea Irvin or something like that. But that strip is totally great and hasn't been reprinted. there's a humor in the performance of Irvin's drawings. And another thing that was kind of funny about this is a lot of Rea Irvin's illustration work was him kind of riffing on other artists. Um, and so here's kind of Kikuo riffing on him. And I kind of got, Irvin did it so much that it makes, I don't, maybe, I feel like maybe Kikuo, you should speak on this more than me, because I feel like it was almost getting illustration jobs and using it as a way to um, explore art history through a job. But is that unfair of me to say or something?
I
We
definitely,
didn't include a lot of his. Go.
yeah, no, I think that's fair. I think that's fair. And maybe we'll talk about that in the section where we talk about the back matter. But yeah, he was constantly flipping styles. And another thing that really compelled me to do this book was it just, he had all these, to make an illustration and comics career, as I think Dash and I maybe live, is you wear a lot of hats, you do a lot of different types of jobs. And he definitely did that. And he was constantly incorporating, as Dash mentioned, like different styles. A lot of his New Yorker covers are like a take on a Japanese print, or one of the covers we did include for Life, where he was where he was art director before the New Yorker, is like a Greek vase, and constantly incorporating these different styles, which I think is like a kind of art directorial mindset. Like you adopt different styles for different jobs. Like it seems like very much like he was envisioning the audience, and he was envisioning different contexts that he wanted to put his audience in, as opposed to the kind of contemporary artist who has a style that he sells, this unique style. But that's something I really relate to. That's the name of the game when you're a professional illustrator. Yeah.
Show your sketches for the cover.
Awesome. Okay, yeah, we'll talk about the cover sketches. And I will say that, did that pop up? Yes. That it was really a collaboration. The cover, in a lot of ways. I'll show you where I started. So this was my first take. So on the right, you see examples of kind of the panels that I'm quoting. Here's the dog and the elephant, and maybe different gestures for the kids. And then here's Grandpa, we haven't talked about Grandpa yet, but he's a character that appears later in the strip, takes over the strip, late edition. And I just thought, like, well, we got to get that elegant dress in there, and then maybe something about their relationship. It's a pretty direct quote to this the Margie and John panel up here. And then I kind of did a few different versions. The job of the professional illustrator, many iterations. Here, looking at the dog who's eating the newspaper. At first, I wasn't sure if I was allowed to redraw the drawing. I thought maybe we're just going to lift the drawing. It seemed like a barrier I didn't want to cross. But then Dash and Lucas at New York Review of Comics really just like, no, like make a cover. Like they gave me permission. So then we started kind of sampling more different ideas. There's great dance scenes. This is a panel I love. I don't know if that one made it in the book, because I don't know if we could find that original strip. Maybe it did. I can't remember now. But
that one's the thank you page.
That's right. I don't think we actually found the original strip, but it made it in the thank you. Here I am just kind of collaging more panels. And then finally, another great scene. John constantly in shock at Margie's audacity. And then finally, just a million iterations of this. And then finally, Dash actually suggested, like, well, what about this panel? And this is actually Dash's mock-up. And here maybe, I don't remember if you changed the smile or if I changed the smile, but it's taken from this panel, of course. And I saw it and I thought, like, well, that's just so one interesting thing about the strip is that when it starts out in the roaring 20s and everybody's wearing this, like, or Margie is wearing these extravagant gowns. And then by year 3, Margie's in the house coats and sweeping. And whether that's a direct answer to the Great Depression, which is referenced in the strip, or whether it's just that Irving ran out of ideas for the rich couple and wanted something a little bit more relatable. Unclear, but it's a natural progression. To me, this wasn't iconic Smyths, so the natural kind of conclusion was like, well, here's another sample. Oh, and I don't actually have a cover file here, but as you recall, the actual cover as it was printed, we just put the kind of 1920s gown back on Margie and put the dog in there. So it was almost like a combination of Dash's suggestion and my very first suggestion kind of coming together. So another case where so fun to collaborate. I never collaborate this way, and so it was such a joy. Dash, we can't hear you. There we go.
Does this look big?
That looks big, yes.
But also you could make it one page at a time instead of continuous scroll. That might help for like seeing the whole image.
Great suggestion.
And
That's
then
it, single page. Is that good?
Yeah, that looks good.
That looks
Cool.
great.
This is some of the back matter in the book, and this came from I don't even remember. This was in something that was like a bunch of different cartoonists did self-portraits.
Yeah, you actually found this one, but yeah, it was a weird book that it was in. I can't remember.
But this to me is perfect and kind of gets at the sensibility of this guy, where it's like a parody of a self-portrait, the artiste in his studio, and it's I mean the question, I feel like the Smythes tone, it's like it's definitely not like Sid Hoff Eat the Rich, but it's also definitely not like totally overly affectionate towards these people. I would say it's a gentle irony or a mocking their aspirations, because his theme is really the snobs, the upturned nose. That's his trademark. These upturned nose snob people. And I feel like any satire, it's good satire. It's like self-implicating, which is present in this self-portrait.
Which of course is referencing the Eustace Tilly cover, just to spell it out.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
These were he did a whole bunch of these that were in the New Yorker that I think of as being like Otto Suglo strips, but much more like nuanced performance, but they are like totally visual, non-verbal gags. And I think that before we started this book, I knew more about this kind of stuff because these things are reprinted in those, best comics of 1942 collections that you can get for $2, or the collections that are like, Ain't Dogs Funny, the kind of themed gag comic collections.
Yeah, so Irving was a regular contributor, and in addition to being the art director, he was a regular contributor of both like single panel gag cartoons and also like multi-panel cartoons. His multi-panel cartoons were always pantomime, which made them distinct from the Smyths. But as you can see in this, there were proto John and Margie characters in the New Yorker before they were in the newspapers here. This one predates the Smyths by a year, and but of course, because Rea Irvin was there at the founding of the New Yorker, he had a hand in not only designing the feel of the magazine, the typeface, but also pioneering a new style of gag cartoon, which is the gag cartoon that really relies on the friction between an image and a single line of dialogue, as opposed to earlier gag cartoons, which relied on a back and forth dialogue or a longer piece of dialogue. He helped kind of pioneer that, what we think of as the New Yorker cartoon today. And this is so if we're talking about that kind of curt approach, you might, that top left ice example is a good example of a short caption, one three-letter word there. And then on the right there, you see a early Marge doppelganger with the dog. I think predating the Smythes by 4 years or so. So he was working out these ideas in the New Yorker before they appeared in the comic strip, the Smythes, I should say.
This is an ad for the Smythes. This was at Billy Ireland too, right?
Yeah.
Wasn't this an actual cutout of that?
I think that was.
So yeah. Here you can see. Go ahead.
Oh, no. Go ahead, Dash.
Well, here you can just see that he's like a favorite humorist of smart New Yorkers, and it's kind of playing up the bouginess of it. I don't know how effective that was to newspaper readers in 1930, but it's funny to see this. When we started this, I was like, there's got to be like Smythes, trash or not, lunch pails, and we tried to find all the Smythes merch, but it doesn't really seem like there was any.
No, it does, and that's part of what kind of I think he was trying to appeal to adults and succeeded, or either succeeded or didn't. But I don't think, the merch never worked out. Maybe that's why it eventually only lasted 6 years. Yeah.
This is an original that came from a collector that I think maybe you talk about why you like this page, because I have my thoughts on this page.
Yeah, it was just a great example of we couldn't find many examples of surviving original art from the Smyths. This one was actually on auction while we were working on this book, and then it sold, and it didn't sell for that much. I think it was like $2,000. We were talking should we just pool our money? But then we actually figured out who bought it through a back channel, and were able to get a scan. So that was a happy ending to that. But I just love, just an example of kind of honoring. The whole book was just, a chance to honor this artist that we love so much, and to honor the line work itself, be able to see it up close. And the book is large. I'm holding it here next to my face. And so you can really get in there and see the way the lines, the pen work kind of cross over the Bristol in a really beautiful way here.
I find this page interesting because there are all these kind of him trying his kind of Winsor McKay-ish surrealism. I mean, it's also like during the surrealists, but that his strengths were with, or my favorite strips really are just about the couple, and he's, in my mind, he's not a great surrealist. He's more like an interpersonal relationship kind of cartoonist. Let's click through. These are some of his New Yorker covers that are absolutely fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
This is a great one. This kind of portrait.
The New Yorker cover.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was just going to say that the
Go
covers
ahead.
we chose, the covers we chose in the back kind of mirror. They're Easter eggs in the rest of the strip. You'll see. You can go, if you read the book, you'll find like a direct correlation of these covers in the strips. Right. So this is a page we faded out an example of a strip where you can see that. If you go back one page, Dash, here. Like in this, if you look at the bottom center panel here, that's highlighted or not faded out, you see the statue with the pouring the water, and all three of these panels, if you go to the next page, there's that same statue on the cover of the New Yorker on the bottom right, and here's that same dancing figure in dancing Margie figure on the left, and of course the upturned nose in the theater scene. So all this work was so directly connected, and it in kind of researching it, you realize it really is a single body of work. It almost feels like a single narrative. And for a while, we talked for a long time. We were debating whether or not just to include the covers, like within the strips, like mixed in with the strips, but couldn't quite figure out a way to make that clear.
It's all part of it's like when you get these collections, I feel like people need some kind of guide of when to stop, because otherwise you're just quitting at some point, or you're like, okay, I've read enough, um, and that's why it felt weird to do it chronological. But I do think it's the best way, and also the as you said, Kikuo, people are really going to first kind of flip through the book and read things out of order for a bit before they dive into the chronological reading. Let's talk about Grandpa and
Yeah.
the yeah.
You want to start?
Well, basically after what is it, the first 4 or 5 years of the comic, he abandons. Is it 4 or 5?
1934. So like between 4 and 5 years, yeah, he abandons the lead male.
He abandons Margie and John, and then he focuses on this goofy grandpa character. And so we obviously, this is a PDF of the book, so we included some of these in the back, but our interest was really with Margie and John, and there's kind of a, people would have different theories about the total change in direction to the strip. Um, you know, to me, it kind of felt like if you know, White Boy, White Boy at some point becomes Skull Valley, and the kind of beautiful, airy openness of White Boy is then replaced by like an aggro hatch fest of Skull Valley, and it's like someone interrupted Garrett Price, like, no, 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 you have to do a comic like this. Like the comic doesn't look like this Matisse stuff. It looks like this other thing. You gotta stop what you're doing. Maybe that person isn't an actual person. Maybe that person's just in their head, or self-doubt or self-consciousness or something that would make him change. But so my reading is that he was like, oh wait, I should make it this goofy grandpa comic and drop the older couple. But then, the strip ended 2 years later. Do you have a theory, Kikuo?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. But it's really interesting. I wondered if it was just that, like, I'll just say that, like, everything that was interesting about the Smyths, like that kind of that I found interesting, that kind of subtle performance. In a lot of ways, I think of it like The Office, where you can imagine if The Office is like, if Steve Carell in The Office is winking at you, the joke falls apart, right? You got to play it totally straight, or it's not funny. Like Steve Carell's like commitment to this absurd character is what makes it work, and I think that that's a lot of the performance that I'm so drawn to in the Smiths. And it's just, he plays it so straight and so well performed. And then with Grandpa, suddenly it was this other thing. It was often surreal. This is so here's a case where he's solving mysteries on roller skates with mobsters, and then in the next one it was like a silent strip. So back to the pantomime that he used to use in the New Yorker. It was just this completely different thing, and so we just decided, let's focus on like the aspect of what I think makes Irvin's comics really unique, especially in the Sunday pages. And then we kind of left out Grandpa aside from these kind of the small sampling.
We killed Grandpa.
Yeah, bye-bye.
This was my favorite. This was at Billy Ireland, this Kellogg's ad that he did that's about relieving constipation, these cowboys talking about constipation. And I think this, first, find this so funny because, like, look at how big his signature is in this ad. Like, he's so proud of this Kellogg's ad. I can't imagine that they requested this. And it has, it's like, it's kind of too good to be true. It also, I think, points to the like when you would see the, like, of course, pop artists would take find the irony in this kind of cartooning or printing. But here, clearly the irony is there, like he knows that this deadline joke is 3,000% intentional. We know from this guy. So I find that I love this ad. We had more of these ads, and I was thinking, like, can maybe the ending of the book will just be these Kellogg's ads.
So the joke here is that the cowboy is like, it's cowboy versus constipation, with Kellogg's All Brand being the solution. So that's kind of the ironic twist.
But an irony in the execution, in these
absolutely.
drawings.
Absolutely.
This is a great one.
Yeah, this might be my favorite Rea Irvin comic strip. Like, just again, it's that elegant body language here dedicated to dance. It's a little bit more hyperbolic, but he's just flexing here, just flexing his ability to draw the human figure.
This, I don't know, you'll have to buy here we go. This is maybe the first superhero comic parody, right? This is before Super Duper Man.
Mm-hmm.
But I think maybe the reason it's not so clearly a parody. It's just that it's Superwoman and she has this upturned nose snob kind of expression.
Right.
I'm sorry, I hogged up a bunch of time on this, but do you want to show some of the other things that we cut?
I think I'm good. I don't know. Do you want to talk about it? I guess I could flash some stuff real quick.
Yeah. Flash some stuff.
I'll just show the kind of some more examples of let's see. So this is examples of sorry, let me find where I am here. Too many windows open. Here we go. So, like, this is just a document that we passed around of, like, so a lot of this material ends up in the book, but then a lot of the comic strip material just kind of debating, like, well, is this stuff we include? Stuff from the New Yorker, comic strips we found all over the place. And some of it is stunning, just beautiful, a lot of beautiful comics. We were really, hopefully this goes without saying, but we're really focused on the comics. We were trying to kind of resurrect the Rea Irvin as cartoonist as opposed to Rea Irvin as illustrator. So we talked a lot about this stuff, but then I'm going to fast forward here. Another thing we talked about is, like, the parallels between the illustration and the comics work. So this is one of the comic strips that appeared in the Smithsonian collection. So we've got them remodeling the bathroom, and here they are with this mermaid painting, like watching John as he bathes. And then you see the exact same gag end up on the cover of the New Yorker in 1943. And this one made it into the New Yorker. So here's Margie doing crazy modern dance, the sophisticated New Yorkers doing their wild cultural elitist things. And then, of course, that makes it on the cover of New Yorker as well. And this just happened again and again. Here they are at the costume party, and here is the costume party. A lot of these made it in, and here's the butterfly from the which appeared at least twice from the Eustace Tilly cover, right? The butterfly appeared at least twice in the Smythes. But yeah, it was really fun to kind of just go through there and find those parallels. Um, uh, yeah, it just happened again and again, and more than even I collected here. Night at the Theater. But yeah, I think that's pretty much. I think that's enough. Oh, here's an example. We were talking earlier about kind of appropriating other styles, and here's Rea Irving's obvious dedication to or admiration for the kind of a Japanese woodblock print from 1947. So we've got a GI here amongst the umbrellas. But I will leave it at that.
Yeah, does anyone have any questions about this stuff? Let's see.
Is that the end of the slideshow presentation?
I think so.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
That was such a nice deep dive into Irvin's work, and also it was just so nice to hear two fully formed cartoonist artists talk about paying such close attention to another artist's work, down to tiny details like the hands and how they're drawn, and tracing other people drawing those hands that way, and like faces of background characters. All these things are just really a pleasure to hear you both talk about. So thank you so much for that. I will read the questions aloud that are in the chat. But also if someone wants to ask a question with your voice, you can do a little raised hand emoji or something like this, or just write that you want to ask it, and then you can unmute yourself at that time. Let's see, we have one here. Thank you so much for the wonderful presentation, Kikuo and Dash. Earlier in your talk, you mentioned some of the more salacious aspects of the Smythes. And I'm wondering, as his comic ran for 2 years after the Hays Code was established for cinema in 1934, if you saw his work become more subdued in any significant way.
Thank you. This is written by a great comics critic and cartoonist. So thank you. The question, Jenna. So, well, I mean, I honestly, are you nodding yes? Because I feel like that's an interesting theory of why the change could be to the grandpa who was they were basically sight gags. That would be, I didn't think about that at all.
Yeah, it never crossed my mind that that might be one of the reasons. We have a list of theories, but it makes sense. It did pivot to a much more child-friendly, just kind of goofy, a zany strip, and away from satire. So certainly less controversy.
Could the change? You know what's funny? So I'm just reading the chat. I guess they won't be recorded on the YouTube, but
oh well, let's read it. Let's read it so that
yeah.
people who watch it later can know what the question is, if you don't mind. Danny asked, could the change to focus on Grandpa have to do with the prosperous stars being less appealing with the continuing Great Depression?
That's a conversation. I actually had that conversation with Francoise Mouly at the New Yorker. We were talking about it. That was her theory. I'm not 100% sure on that, but it makes sense. It makes sense. Or just like maybe heading in, maybe escapist humor is more appealing than like satire.
I feel like the grandpa's richer. The grandpa can afford to be zany.
Maybe. Yeah. It's
that's how I see him, as, being able to afford to spend his time chasing around in the horse race that he runs through and all of his goofy jokes. But because also we know the Smythes lore is that the uncle is obscenely wealthy from that one comic.
Right. The I was going to point out that there is actually there are actually 3 grandpas that appear in the comic strip, so it's actually unclear like what his provenance is. But this is an early grandpa, and this is from the first year of the strip, so you really see the kind of class shift that, at least in terms of the dress and the appearance that happened, because this is how the first grandpa looked, with a monocle, even with Eustace Tilly's monocle.
I think it's also the Smythes couple are kind of, they're pretending to be wealthy a lot of the time. They're kind of like middle class aspirational wealth.
Right, suburban,
Um,
even like in the later strips, like in one of the strips we show, they're like mowing a lawn, and the joke is always like a social faux pas, like how did we embarrass ourselves in this high class society?
Paul, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, there we go. Hi, guys.
Hey, Paul, thanks so much for tuning in. It's great
Thank
to
you
see
so
you.
much
Are
for
you
signing
kidding
on.
me?
So very
Are
cool
you
of you.
kidding me? Thank you so much for this book. It's like my favorite, but it's the book I've been dreaming of, and I didn't even know I was having the dream. I mean, top to bottom, you guys totally killed this. It's so wonderful. I'm so happy to own this
Your
book.
your Nancy book was a touchstone for us. Like that, the research you did on
I
that
think
just
it
is
was the
puts it.
size, the scale
Yeah,
reference.
absolutely.
Well,
And just we didn't want to embarrass ourselves to be next to that book, but yeah.
well, thank you very much. But what I'm curious about, you know, is whether you came into any understanding about how he colored the strips, because it seems like there's a real range of color sensibilities. When you look at like his covers at the New Yorker at Life, there's sort of a palette that you know that he gravitated towards, right? And it's sort of a pastel-y, sort of subdued thing. But some of the strips in the book, they're like pumped up, and some of them are pulled back. And, you know, I know they come from different sources, but I was wondering if you learned anything about the coloring, and did he do a color chart or indicators the way some Sunday cartoonists did?
That's a great question. We were able to find any of that process work aside from that one, or aside from a couple original like ink strips. But what you're pointing out is a something that really stood out to us, and also kind of just the feeling of the strip moving from something kind of more sophisticated to something more adolescent, or more childlike feeling. Part of that also is the color, where it starts out with all these muted hues, which, as you might be able to tell in the book, were very difficult to reproduce because of the yellowed newsprint. But and then it kind of goes to a more primary palette, especially in the grandpa years, is that bright red, that bright yellow. But as far as like who and how that was controlled, we didn't come up with anything for that. There was so little written about the strip, and we talked to the existing relatives, and dug around everywhere we could, but we could not find much process stuff. We couldn't. We could. The thing I really was hoping to find was like, what did Irvin think about this? Like, was this something he did for a paycheck and then disappeared, or was this his true passion but couldn't make it a living, or whatever, or couldn't make it work? We never found a single kind of thing that he
Well,
really.
now that you bring it up, like, is there any interview with him? I can't even think of ever seeing an interview with the guy.
We couldn't find one. If there is, we couldn't find it. Yeah, we really don't know what he thought. So these are all great questions. Why did Grandpa appear? Like, we thought about it nonstop, but like, I mean, we're just guessing. Yeah.
It's a great book. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Paul.
Thank you.
There's another question that also asks about color, but also goes into a different sort of angle on it. From Andrew. Hi, Andrew. Um, Thank you for making this book. It looks beautifully designed and the reproduction looks incredible. Could you please talk about color, depth, and space in the Smythes? I'm struck by the perfectly balanced clarity in each panel.
So cool of you, Andrew, to come. Thank you so much. Andrew Lindsay's also a cartoonist, and the well, when you read Caitlin's essay, I just read it before doing this Zoom, and it feels like almost like an artist is kind of getting tokens through their life that they then, like a video game, they're gathering these things that then are like applied to their work. And because he grew up around all this Asian art in San Francisco, and so I think of this space in the Smythes as being very like Japanese woodblock printy, and we shout out in our intro that the dog to me looks like the dogs in kind of hokusai sketchbooks that are very specific and cartoony. But the space I also feel like is very unique, and we also say this in our introduction. Like when I think of what's a comparable thing drawing wise to the Smythes, I think of mostly Tintin, which is after Rea Irvin. It started the same year, but it's the early Tintin, which doesn't really look like the Tintin that we know. So like Glorious Williams is kind of in that zone, but he never did a comic like this. So, well, I don't know. Do you have something to say about the flat space of the Smythes? Let me blab a hair more, actually.
Mhm.
Because there's all these comic strips that are so exciting that are like these blockbuster, explosive, crazy layouts that are in like the Great Society is Nick's book, and but look, he saw all of those kinds of things, but he decided to do a fixed panel grid. And I think that that is innovative because I feel like that emphasizes the character performances panel to panel when the layout doesn't change. So even though it might kind of look like he's a bit more of a boring guy for only having these fixed panels, I think it's very smart. And it actually emphasizes, it was a smart formal decision to emphasize the characters.
So much of it, yeah, to echo what Dash is saying, like in terms of the space of the strip, I think of it completely like a stage set. And it's as Dash said, the fixed perspective, the action happens perpendicular to the viewer, right? It's happening on a stage. And it's a vehicle for him to kind of have his actors perform, and you get to see their full body a lot of the time, and really act out those scenes. And that seemed to be his passion in drawing, at least in the comic, is bringing these characters to life from panel to panel. At least that's what I see in it. And yeah, I also love the sense of space you get when you see the whole figure interacting in the environment.
You had mentioned talking to his family members. I'm just kind of curious what you learned from that process. What was it like working on this book and not being able to talk to the artist himself, but trying to kind of, I don't know, you're taking some liberties with it. You're trying to do a good service for like presenting this work, but you kind of have to figure it out with the information you have. What was it like talking to them?
I'm
Dash.
curious what Kikuo's answer is.
It was fun. We had, I think, Caitlin talked to Molly Rippey, the granddaughter, and also her husband, who actually is a underground cartoonist.
And we did too.
Yeah, and we did it. We did as well. We talked to them, and I think Lucas visited them as well. So 3 separate meetings, and they had like a stack of like 11 comic strips, and Molly remembers the property. Like Caitlin writes about Rea Irvin like dug out a pond in his backyard and swam in it, and Molly remembered the pond and remembered Grandpa, but mostly talked about it as a faint memory. And it was actually her husband, Larry Rippey, who was super passionate about the strip, a cartoonist himself, and like had kind of collected some material, but didn't have too many direct. Maybe the story of the research was not finding a lot of direct kind of anecdotes from the man or with the man.
I really just remember that it was so tempting to kind of graft it onto the John and Margie character, where people would talk about John being very kind of quiet, and Rea Irvin being quiet, and his partner being the star of the show, who would host all of these parties, and that they would, and that so much was about Rea Irvin as an actor. But I don't like, that's probably how anyone would. That's me wanting to see that. That is fun to think of them as sort of like autobiographical comics. But maybe he's just making it all up, and it doesn't really matter.
Cool, thanks. Robert has a question. Do you want to ask it?
Yeah, hi. Great to see you.
Yeah,
This
Hey.
Hey, this book looks amazing, and I'm kind of in awe of Ray Irvin again. I'm curious. Um, I don't know how much you might know about this, but do you have a sense of what his work life was like? I mean, the amount of things that he's doing. I mean, he's full-time art director at the New Yorker, I'm assuming, and doing the strip as well as doing the Kellogg's ads. I know these weren't all at the same time, but is there much, and maybe this is part of what's in the afterword, but is there much discussion of just how he managed to accomplish all this?
Um, Thanks, Robert. Great to see you. And thanks so much for joining. Um, and I was just showing your work to my students, by the way. But anyway, the one of the things that really appeals, we didn't find a lot of like any kind of record of his
We didn't.
practice. But
There was no correspondence
yeah.
kept.
Yeah. So the best we could do is kind of like find all the material, look at the date, and be like, oh my God, he did all this like in the same month or whatever. And so in addition to all the things you mentioned, he also had a regular, like if you look through the same New Yorkers that he was trying to covers on, almost every single week he had a brand new Murad cigarette ad. So he was a little black and white cartoon, but he was drawing the Murad cigarette ad. He was drawing the cover. He was telling Otto Slago what to do, or whatever, whoever else was a cartoonist in the New Yorker at the time, and then he would go off and do his whatever other gig he could get. And I'm not sure. I'm not sure how he did it all.
Well, he only went to the New Yorker like one day a week, right? That was his arrangement when he started.
That's right,
But
from
then,
Connecticut.
if you probably read the Peter Arno biography, but he would get drunk one night and draw 10 comics that night, and then spend 6 days partying. So it doesn't seem like Ray Irvin was like that, but maybe he was. He was. Maybe he was. We don't know. Peter Arno was pretty productive somehow on that schedule.
I'll consider that. Thanks.
Yeah. That's the advice.
It's a question I'm asking myself because I would like to mimic his productivity for sure.
We have another question from Michael. You referred to him as an actor. Was his performance experience before, after, or during his comics and illustration career?
I think throughout. I think he was a member of the Players Club in New York. That's like if you go on the Library of Congress, there's like, and Google his name, a photo appears of him wearing like a wizard costume, I believe. I can't remember, a weird costume with two other people. That might have been I think that was related to the Players Club. But yeah, I think it was just a lifelong passion. And I'm not sure. I think Molly talked about it a little bit. Do you remember much more, Dash?
I just remember it was often the first thing said about him.
Yeah.
In writing about him and Molly, and that just seemed kind of striking. That
yeah.
He had this like probably he had kind of plays that, like amateur plays that he would perform, and that was maybe his main hobby, or other life outside of drawing comics.
Yeah, and even our back blurb from James Thurber on the back here lists him as artist, and then second, ex-actor. So maybe ex-actor implies that he had stopped acting by the time James was interviewed, but yeah, not sure. Interesting, but again, to Dash's point, the second thing listed. Yeah, thank you, Michael. It was great to see you here.
We have a question from Christina. Any plans to continue this line of research into other New Yorker cartoonists? Also a fan of Garrett Price, but can't find anything about him. Any research tips for anyone wanting to dive into the rabbit hole?
That's a question for you, Dash.
Well, there, White Boy was in the Comics Journal and Art Out of Time and in an incredible Sunday Press book. There you go. Um, and then his other things are they're around and they're inexpensive. Like I think Drawing Room Only, which collects a bunch of his gag comics, at least when I got it, is like $2 on eBay. And he illustrated a bunch of books that are kind of like, you know, YA before now they're called YA, but slightly older than children's books. Like someone else will remember the name, but it's like Cloverfield's Magic Children, or that's kind of, he did a series of those. So those are all available. But no, there's no biography about him. Although I really love that Sunday Press. The intro to that kind of covers a lot of material. And research tips for anyone else wanting to dive into the rabbit hole. I think this isn't a research tip at all, but I think what immediately popped into my head about it was that, like I said early, with loving all of these different comics and then finding this whole other world open up and getting into these gag cartoonists being exciting, is that I feel like the part of the fun of the book, I hope, is that, oh, here's this whole other cartoonist that had this whole other thing going on, this side track that was outside of what I knew as a lifelong mega fan of comics. And that if you feel like you've seen every cartoonist or, you know, every exciting book or movie, that's the depression talking, because you can just keep going forever. And there's always other things to find. And New York Review of Comics has been great at that with lots of the books that they do, and Fantagraphics and Drawn and Quarterly. And you know, I read Moomin to my daughter like every morning practically, and our whole world is Moomin world. And I don't think any of those books were around when I was a kid. And now I think like Moomin is in my top 10 favorite comics of all time. So I guess the only tip is just that if you're feeling bummed out about things, it's your fault, because there's just tons of things that can go out that haven't been reprinted, or that are just off to the side, or, you know, meanwhile, while all of these there's always these kind of outlier people that were doing interesting things at the same time of the people that we know.
I have one little.
You want to say anything about that?
Oh.
No, that was awesome. That was awesome, Dash. Yeah.
I have a quick question that's kind of half cooked, but I'm so interested in just how appreciating these works is sort of filtering into both of your practices, cartooning work. And you mentioned so often the understated performance in these. I'm just curious, like, how much is that prioritized in your own work, or how do you think about performance of your own characters in terms of that?
So in my last graphic novel, that was like, it was all about people who never say what they actually feel, and all the emotions were kind of just under the surface. And so I was really trying to walk that line of if the minute that a performance got too big or too obvious, it just, everything seemed to fall apart. Everybody had to be kind of stoic, but still very expressive. And so that was initially what just drew me to the work and got me obsessed. I do feel like, you know, like I think people say, you're working on a big project like this, it allows you to not only go deep onto your passion and that exciting addiction element of like an art, like that lust. I think it's lust when you really love an artist's work, and then but it also lets you exercise that a little bit, exorcise that a little bit. And so I feel like I dove deep, and now I'm looking at other things. But yeah, Dash.
Performance. I'm trying to think of um I don't know. I had different like missions for a little while. Like on Blurry, I thought I wanted to have um heads be bigger than they are normally in a comic. Can so occupy more of the frame. But that, that isn't like Rea Irvin, but that was a and then when it got to the new animated movie, it was really like, how do I make a painted face? Because normally in animation, it's very flat. So for the new movie, a whole lot is like, how can I make the planes of the face occupy a whole, you know, movie screen and be interesting? Uh, but the sometimes things like you only realize later that, oh, I was also like researching this other thing, and so then that's why this thing a year later turned out the way it was. And I don't um I don't know how it'll play out. It was definitely very it made me love all of those reprint books so much more and get to spend more time with them and see, oh, what did they say in their introduction? Oh, because it's like what they chose to talk about is so important. They didn't say this, they were talking about this other thing, or they chose these colors. So it kind of like reinvigorated um, picking up all of those collections again and thinking about it, because I never thought I would do a book like this. Um,
I just signed on because Dash was like, we should do this. I was like, well, if Dash wants to do it, I want to work with Dash. So yeah, I especially didn't think I was going to do a book like this.
How long was the process from start to finish?
3 years about.
oh, really? I feel in my head it's exaggerated. In my head it was longer than that.
It might have been longer. It might have been. It was a while.
4 years.
It was a long time. I mean, it takes just to wait for people to get back to you, whether or not like libraries, whether or not they have like the strip. That was a big part of it. We were just waiting to try to find the stuff. Yeah.
And it was very touching that, a site, a school would say that they have this paper, and we knew it ran in this paper. And so I would very politely email them every couple weeks, go look at your paper collection. We know it ran in your paper. And then eventually they would go there and they would say, oh, we threw out all of the comics, 20 years ago. So they kept the other things, but we tossed the comics. And that they were such that comics were such junk, such trash for all of these years, before and now. It's also kind of funny because so many of these strips had way larger print runs than I will ever have. And somehow like little, Otto Suglow's Little King had like bajillions of readers. And I cite that because that one's like kind of very obviously in my mind like an art comic, more than other comics. But somehow it has to be like the 1980s before people would kind of look at it that way.
Well, I think maybe we could end with Paul's comment here in the chat that says, I am so very glad you did a quote book like this. I think everyone here is very glad. It's such a service to the rest of us that you did all this deep digging and waiting and drawing and making all these different decisions to share this with everyone. So thank you both so much for doing that in the first place, and then also talking about it here. And it was really fun getting to see you like weave your brains together and your presentations together. It felt like insight into your working process as well. So Yeah,
Well,
thanks.
thank you, Lily,
Thanks,
and
Lily.
thank you so much for the invitation. And thanks to everybody who showed up. It was really
Yeah.
so fun. Great
Very cool of
questions.
you all to sign on here. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks everybody. And one little thing to say here is that there's one more talk as part of the fall series. It will be next Monday. Xander Morrow, who will be talking about the Dirk Palace Library in Providence, and the Dirk Palace as the origin point for North American art risograph printing. So it'll be a very interesting talk Monday at 7 p.m. next week. Please join us for that. And yeah, thank you all so much for coming.